By the end of this video, you're going to know the 20 best low-light houseplants for dark rooms. If you struggle with keeping plants alive because you don't have a lot of light in your house, this video is for you. But you're going to want to make sure you watch until the very end, because I'm saving the best for last, of course. This is an incredibly unique and beautiful plant that you're not going to see on anyone else's list, so you're not going to want to miss it. I'm going to start the list off with the Stellia, which is a plant with truly breathtaking and beautiful leaves. If you haven't heard of the plant before, it's because it's actually a relatively new plant. The Stellia is a hybrid of other types of calatheas, and it's only been made widely available to buy within the past few years. So calatheas are incredible plants, and there's many impressive looking varieties, but I think the Stellia might be the nicest of them all, honestly. So the top side of the leaves have these marbled splotches of green and white, and it looks almost like a watercolor painting. It's really incredible. I've never seen any other plant like this. And then the underside has this beautiful purple color. So if you have a spot where you can put them like at eye level, so that the top and the bottom of the leaves are both visible, they're really stunning, and that's really the way to do it. And calatheas come from actually from the jungles of the Amazon, where they grow on the forest floor, which is under a dense canopy, so they can actually do quite well in low light. But like any of the calatheas, the Stellia is very sensitive to tap water. It's sensitive to the metals and fluoride that are in tap water. So you really need to water them with filtered or distilled water. So if you're looking for a low light house plant that's much easier in terms of watering, I've got another good plant for you right here. All right, for the next great low light house plant, I'm going to go with a classic, the Sansevieria. So they're known commonly as the snake plant or the mother-in-law's tongue, but they're really just a great low light house plant, one of the best, and they're also very low water. So really, Sansevierias are one of the most versatile house plants. They can take really bright light and they can take really low light, but you just need to water them accordingly. If they're in a low light spot, you'll barely water them. If they're in a bright spot, you'll water them a lot. So if you're someone who goes out of town a lot, then this is a great option for you. Even if you're going to be gone for a month or 6 weeks, you can just water it and it's going to be just fine. I think honestly, watering them just once a month or once every 6 weeks it's all they need. If they're in a dark spot, if they're in a brighter spot, you could water them a little more often, but even in a brighter spot, they'd be just fine. So um, they need very little water and they can handle very low light. So you can't really find, honestly, an easier house plant to keep alive than a snake plant. But snake plants are very common. You're going to find them in many homes. Anyone who has any house plants, they probably have a snake plant. So if you want something more unique, this next one's for you. So for this next one, I'm going with the Antherium clarinervium. Okay, so these clarinerviums are fairly uncommon houseplants. You're definitely not going to see it in the beginner houseplant enthusiast's home. They are native to the jungles of Mexico, and they can take very low light because they grow under the jungle canopy, but they do like higher humidity because of that. So they are also called the velvet cardboard anthurium due to their thick velvety leaves. And so it gives them a really unique look. And they have basically these bright white lines that cut through the velvety green, and it makes them look almost like they're glowing. So it's a very strange appearance, and it makes them look almost like they're fake, honestly. But it's a very strange and beautiful looking plant that's going to stand out in even the darkest corners of your room. Unfortunately, since they are so uncommon, the Clarinervium anthurium are pretty expensive. So if you want another low light houseplant for great value, I'll show you what I think is the best value low light houseplant. Plant number 4, the umbrella tree. So the umbrella tree, or the Schefflera arboricola, it's very fast growing, and so that's why I think they're able to be sold for such a cheap price. When it comes to indoor trees, you're really not going to find a better value than the umbrella tree. if you look around, it's not uncommon to find one that's 3 or 4 feet tall and only like 40, $45. Um, so I think that the shape of the leaves gives these plants a really cool look for any dark spot in your home. And since they're so fast growing, even if you underwater or overwater them, a little bit, and they start to drop some leaves, they're going to grow back very quickly. So they're an easy plant. You don't really need to worry about them. And if you're looking for an easy, large plant that can grow in low light, you can't go wrong with an umbrella tree. If you're not looking for a tree though, and you want something a bit smaller, this next one is for you. All right, plant number 5, rattlesnake plant. So the rattlesnake plant, it's another low light plant that has really striking foliage. And although, naturally when they're growing outside, they'll grow these small yellow flowers, they're not that likely to ever flower indoors. But honestly, who needs flowers when you have leaves like these? They're just beautiful. So they have these light green leaves that are freckled with these very dark, almost black spots. Dark green, nearly black or like purple. And they grow in a very specific pattern that is really cool. And you won't find a houseplant quite like this. Um, and similar to the Stellia Cathia, the underside has this beautiful shade of purple. And so if you can keep them at eye level, you're really going to get the full effect and see all the colors together. Okay, but the thing is, the rattlesnake plant, it's going to stay pretty small, topping out at about like 2 feet or so. So if you're looking for a good low light house plant that will get a lot bigger, I'm going to show you one of my favorites. Next up, we've got the Drina Reflexa. Of all the many types of Dracaenas, which there are a ton, I think that the Reflexa has become my favorite recently. Um, it's really nice, and it's got really cool pattern, really cool growth structure. Um, it's just a really nice plant for a low light spot in your house. So there are 3 main types of Reflexa. There's the normal green one, Song of Jamaica, and my personal favorite, the Song of India. The Song of India, it has these incredible yellow and green leaves that are really going to brighten up any dark area in your home. And the stems of the Reflexa, they have like an almost bamboo-like look. And they grow at very strange angles, and they curve and branch out in unusual ways. And so it gives the plants a really cool look. Some people even like to remove a lot of the leaves just to show off the stem. Um, and Reflexes can grow very tall. They can grow to like 10 or 15 feet tall if they're in a big pot. They'd need to be in a big pot to get that big. But if you've got them in a big pot, they'll grow very tall. So, they're a great plant to have in a dark room that has high ceilings. But Reflexas, in my opinion, they are slightly harder to care for than some of the other Dracaenas. So, if you overwater them, they're going to quickly start to drop leaves. If you want a Dracaena that's a little bit easier to keep alive, I would go for the Marginada. All right, next up, plant number 7, Drina Marginada. So these are another classic house plant. They're a great low light plant that's been popular for many years and for good reason. They're easy to keep alive in low light areas, and there are many different types. They have leaves ranging from yellow to red to pink, and basically all of them are characterized by different colored margins that are on the edge of the leaves, which is where they get their name from, the marginata. And I think my personal favorite is the bicolor marginata. It has a strip of green down the middle, and then like white and reddish, almost pink stripes on the edges. And the color combination, it's definitely unusual for low light plants. So again, it's another one that's gonna really stand out in the darker parts of your house. Marginatas can also grow very tall. They can grow to like 15 or even 20 feet tall, um, but they're pretty slow growing, especially inside. They're not going to grow that fast. Um, But basically, because of that, they can work both as like a small shrubby plant or a tree, depending on basically what size you buy it at. Um, and the small ones can be fairly cheap, while the larger ones are pretty expensive. Makes sense. But overall, they're just a great plant, and they'll work for whatever kind of size you want and for whatever look you're going for. So, Marginata, it's an awesome plant if you're looking for a tree or a shrub. Um, but if you're looking for something trailing, something you can put in a hanging pot or like up on a shelf and have it hang down, this next one's for you. Plant number 8, pothos. Pothos, it's probably the most popular houseplant of all plants. Of all houseplants, if someone has just a single houseplant in their home, it's probably a pothos. They're really the absolute best beginner plant for a few reasons. First of all, they're pretty much the easiest houseplant of all to keep alive. It can be overwatered or underwatered for long stretches of time, and they're going to be just fine. They're pretty much bulletproof, and they're nearly impossible to kill. And they can also handle like pretty much any light conditions. They can be right in a window in bright light, or they can be in a very dark low light area, and they're going to be just fine in either spot. They also grow very quickly, so they're perfect if you want a vining plant that can grow very long and hang down over a shelf or from a windowsill and cover a large amount of space. You can't go wrong with a pothos. If you want a plant you can just put anywhere and it's going to stay alive forever, go with a pothos. But everyone who has pretty much any house plant, they're going to have a pothos plant. So if you want another trailing low light houseplant that's much less common and has a much more unique kind of look, you're going to want to go for the next plant. Right, plant number 9, the Selaginella uncinata, known as the rainbow moss or the peacock fern. So this plant, it's become recently one of my absolute favorite houseplants. It's got this bright blue color that's something you're not going to really see on any other houseplant. It's incredibly unique and incredibly cool looking, and it's just a perfect choice for a low light hanging plant. If you have it in a hanging pot that's hanging from the ceiling so that it has a wall as the background behind it, the blue color is going to look really cool in front of pretty much any different color. And it's going to really stand out, and it's going to draw the eye of anyone who comes over to your house. Anyone who sees it is going to be immediately amazed by the look, and they're going to demand that you tell them where you got it from, because they are going to want one for themselves. I guarantee it. But like any fern, peacock fern, the rainbow moss, it's going to need very high humidity, and so you're going to need to mist it down every couple of days. I'd say you'd want to mist it down. So if you want something that you're not going to have to water very often, stay tuned for the next one. Plant number 10, the Zedy plant. So I think of Zedy plants as pretty much in the same category as snake plants, at least in terms of watering. They they start to develop these like large bulbs under the soil that store water, and so they don't need to be watered very often at all. In a low light spot, I'd water them probably once a month. And in terms of a low light, low water plant, they actually grow pretty quickly. So if you keep transplanting them into bigger and bigger pots over time, they'll actually grow, fairly large, and the stems will probably get to like 3 or 4 feet tall, and they'll start kind of curving over like this. Um, and they have these bright green glossy leaves, that really look great and really stand out in a dark room. Um, and there's also actually a purple one that looks very nice as well. So the Zedy plant, it's an awesome low light plant, but it just has the green or the purple leaves. It has no other colors or patterns on it. So if you want something that's more colorful and eye catching, I'll show you the best plant for that. All right, next up we've got bromeliads, one of my most favorite plants of all plants. All right, so bromeliads are some of the most absolutely beautiful plants that exist on Earth, not just in terms of houseplants or low-light plants, just on Earth. Okay, so there are hundreds of different types, and they all have these different bright colors and incredible patterns. And some of them also have flowers that don't just last for a long time, but are tremendously striking and honestly awe-inspiring. They're just some of them are just like you can't even believe that they're real. Um, and so bromeliads come from the jungles of Central and South America, and some of them actually contain an entire ecosystem just in their leaves, which I think is really cool. So the way that the leaves comes off the stem, it creates these like little cups in the base of each leaf, and they get filled up with water as it rains. And they actually provide many species of tree frogs with a place to lay their eggs. Um, which is super cool. They lay their eggs right in there, and the tree frogs are born right out of the bromeliad. So they're really special plants because of their place in the jungle ecosystem, and just because of the many beautiful patterns and colors and flowers, and they're just like no other plants. And so some bromeliads stay quite small, and then some get a little bigger and have some large flowers that can get, a couple of feet tall, but not much bigger than that. So if you're looking for another very tropical looking low light house plant that will get a lot larger, I'll show you that next. For plant 12, I'm going with the Amante Chefa. The Amante Chefa, it's in the same family as the umbrella tree, but it has these much larger, more tropical looking leaves. And the leaves can really get quite large, and they grow off the branches like in this cool circular pattern. And so they can bring a really cool tropical kind of vibe to your house. And they also grow very fast. They can grow like 2 or 3 feet a year. Um, and they're from the jungles of Papua New Guinea. And in the ground, in their native habitat, they'll grow into huge trees, 50 or 60 feet tall, which obviously isn't practical indoors. So as they grow larger, you're going to have to cut them back. You can cut them back from the top, and that's going to encourage them to branch out more and grow wider instead of taller. So, if you want a tropical plant that you can grow in the low light spots of your home, and it's going to quickly fill up a large space, this is the best option for that. But if that vigorous growth sounds, more than you can handle in a smaller space, I'm going to show you another great low light house plant that's going to stay a bit smaller. Next up, we've got the Chinese evergreen, the Aglaonema. Chinese evergreens, they're another great low light plant, and they're really going to bring a very exotic and tropical look to your home or office, wherever you want to keep them. Um, there's many different types with different colors and different patterns on the leaf, and so you can be sure to find one that's going to look good in any type of room. Most popular types are the ones with green leaves, which have these broad green leaves, and then they have various types of like white or silver patterns on them. But a lot of people don't know that there are actually many type of red and pink Chinese evergreens, which can add a lot of color to your dark indoor areas. They're easy to care for, and they're also very good at purifying the air, which is a big reason that many people want houseplants in the first place. But I will say Chinese evergreens, they're pretty slow growing, and they're not going to grow that big. They're only going to grow to about like 3 feet tall at their biggest height. Um, but there's another low light house plant that looks very similar to the Chinese evergreen, but grows much bigger. So I'll show you that one next. Plant number 14, the Dieffenbachia. So the Dieffenbachia, they have pretty similar looking leaves and a similar growth style to the Chinese evergreen, but they'll actually grow much bigger. So while Chinese evergreens are only going to grow to about like 3 feet tall, Dieffenbachia can grow to 10 or 12 feet tall over time. And as they get taller, the leaves are also going to get really large. The leaves can get very wide and grow to like 2 feet long. So they're another plant that's going to really bring a very cool and kind of tropical look to any like low light spot, any low light space in your home. And the um, the different types have many different kind of striking patterns on the leaves. And so while some have you know, largely white leaves with just a few spots of green or like green around the edge, which is pretty uncommon for houseplants that have white leaves. Um, there's some that have leaves that look almost like a camouflage pattern, which is called the camouflage Dieffenbachia. And those ones, those are one of my favorites. So, although they do have very unique and uncommon patterns on the leaves, the shape of the leaves and just the kind of way they look, um, it is still, you know, looks like an ordinary plant. So, if you want a house plant that has very strange and uncommon leaf shape, this next plant is really going to fascinate you, I think. Okay, the finger anthurium is up next. So the leaf shape of the finger anthurium, it's really one of a kind. There's no other plants I've seen like it. Um, so, you know, when they're small, the leaves are just gonna have like 3 points on them and look like that. But as they get bigger, they're gonna start to get the appearance of hands with fingers outstretched. You know, they look kind of like that. And so they're super cool. And you know, I've just never seen any other plant that has leaves like that. They'll get about like 2 or 3 feet tall. So they're a great plant to put as like a centerpiece on a table if you have a windowless room where you want a really, you know, unique, kind of strange, weird kind of vibe. They're perfect for that. Um, and I found they're really easy to keep alive. So whether you tend to overwater or underwater your plants, it's just a great choice to create an odd but very cool look in your home. All right, so while the finger anthuriums, they might bloom from time to time, the flowers are nothing special. They're just kind of, you know, they're really grown for their leaves. The flowers aren't what they're known for. Um, the leaves are definitely the focal point when it comes to these finger anthuriums. But there is another type of anthurium that has these long lasting, very colorful blooms. So I'll show you that now. All right, we are up to plant number 16 on our list, and I'm going for number 16 with the Dutch Anthurium. So when it comes to plants that are gonna flower indoors in low light, the Dutch Anthurium is definitely one of the best. Dutch Anthuriums, they have these heart-shaped leaves and flowers, and so they're a great plant if you're looking for a plant to give as a gift for Valentine's Day or Mother's Day. They're perfect for that. The flowers are usually red or pink, and they last for a really long time. And not only that, but they'll continuously bloom all year round if you keep them healthy. And that's very rare when it comes to low light house plants. So if you want a beautiful flowering plant that you can put even in even the darkest of rooms, look no further than the Dutch Anthurium. The Dutch Anthurium, they do stay pretty small. They'll usually not get more than like 2 feet tall, but there is actually one other houseplant that can also flower in low light conditions, but gets a bit bigger. All right, next up, we've got the peace lily. And the peace lily, they're another low light houseplant that's been popular for decades. And, you know, when that's the case, there's usually a reason. The peace lilies they're super easy to keep alive and to keep flowering all the time, even in very little light. And you know, they have these large white flowers, which can really brighten up a dark room. So they're a great choice for a low light spot. And although, you know, there are some varieties that will only grow to like a foot or 2 feet tall, there are some types of peace lilies that will grow to up to 6 feet tall. And so the way that the large white flowers shoot up above the foliage, it gives them a really cool look, especially against if you have them in front of a dark wall. So the background is a, you know, a dark colored wall, and then you got these big white flowers. That is like the perfect spot for them. But peace lilies, they do need a lot of water. So if you're not home that much, they might not be the best choice. But if you're someone who tends to overwater your plants, they're the perfect choice, because they're basically impossible to overwater. Um, but I will say that the peace lilies, they constantly put out new leaves. They're constantly growing. And so it can become very dense. And if you want something that has kind of longer, thinner stems in order to not block your view of something, if you want it on a table or, you know, in front of a painting or something like that, I'll show you the perfect plant for that kind of spot. Pinstripe Calathea. The Pinstripe Cathia are a great choice if you want, like I said, a plant that's not going to block your view of something. They generally grow their leaves on the, the end of these kind of long, thin stems. So if you want a plant that you can put in front of a painting and not totally block the view, or if you want to put it on a kitchen table, where you're not going to block the view of your loved ones, it's perfect. Maybe, hey, I don't know, maybe you do want to block the view of your loved ones. But if you don't, go with the Pinstripe Cathia. Um, the leaves, they have this beautiful dark shade of green with these pink stripes kind of curving across them. And the combination of the green and pink creates this really elegant look. So it'd be perfect for a dining room or like a really nice living room. It's really like a elegant, very kind of refined look, I think. And while you might have some spots that call for these kind of long, spindly stems, if you want another plant that has a similar refined and kind of elegant look, but will fill in more, a bit more space, this next one's for you. All right, the Boston Fern. Boston Fern, they're a specific type of sword fern, and they were first discovered in a shipment of ferns being sent to Boston in the late 1800s. That's how they get their name. They're not native to Boston, I assure you. But in the late 1800s, some that grew like this were discovered in a shipment of plants in the late 1800s, and they've been popular ever since then. So unlike other ferns that are gonna kind of hang straight down as they get large, the leaves of the Boston fern are going to stay a bit more upright, and they create this very dramatic kind of arching look that looks very elegant and very luxurious in many different kind of situations. They'll work great in hanging pots. They'll look just incredible if you have a pot that's like on a raised plant stand. That's my favorite. They look really nice in that kind of spot. Um, but they'll look very nice just sitting on the floor as well. Um, so, if you want to create a very fancy and old fashioned kind of look in your home, Boston Fern is really a must have. And so, all right, we're getting to the last plant here, guys. So, while all of these plants are going to look awesome in any low light area in your home, I have one more that I guarantee you have never seen someone have in their house before. This is one of the coolest plants I have ever seen before. And if you want an absolutely amazing, one of a kind, low light house plant that none of your friends have or probably have ever even heard of, you're going to want to see this one. All right, plant number 20. We made it to the end here, guys. And I told you I was going to save the best for last. Once you see this plant, I think you're going to have no doubt that I really did. And this is the Australian tree fern. Okay, so while I've showed you many unique plants in this video, there is surely no more unique low light houseplant than this. The Australian tree fern is just what it sounds like. It's both a fern and a tree. And I'll admit, I've only heard of this recently myself. So while it is a fern and it has those classic looking fern leaves, it grows a trunk like a tree. It's basically like a combination of a palm tree and a fern. So like a palm tree, as it grows bigger and starts to lose the lower leaves, the stem starts to get bare at the bottom and it becomes like the trunk of a tree. And so this is how the plant grows, like a palm tree, but it has fern leaves rather than palm fronds. So if you imagine a palm tree, but the leaves are coming out looking, all rolled up like those classic fiddlehead ferns, that's what it is. They start all rolled up and then they slowly unfurl like that. It's like a giant version of a tree with the fiddlehead ferns as branches. It's really crazy looking. So it looks like something out of a Dr. Seuss book or something like that. It's really just like nothing I've ever seen before. So when they're small, before it has any bit of a trunk, they're gonna just look like a normal fern. So if you want one that has that, that looks like a tree, you got to either be prepared to put many years into growing it, or just splurge and buy one that's already a few feet tall and it's starting to develop that tree trunk already. Um, this is one plant where I think it's totally worth it to buy a large one. even if it's a few $100s, because you want to really appreciate just how special this plant is right away. So, like any fern, you're going to want to keep them humid. You're going to want to mist them down. But other than that, it's not very hard to grow at all. Um, and it really is just one of the most incredible plants I've ever seen in my life. I've never seen anything like it whatsoever. So, if you want the number one coolest low light houseplant that exists, you have to get an Australian tree fern. All right. So thank you, my people. If you made it to the end, I love you very much. This has been my list of the 20 best low light plants. I think, we covered all the best. That is the 20 best you're going to see. That is the best list of low light plants you're going to see anywhere on YouTube. So if you liked it, please subscribe. Please like the video. And I'm going to be back with many more videos to come. So thank you, my people. Love you guys very much.
It's my birthday. Ugh.